What if I told you that the Vatican hides a document so dangerous, so devastating, that it reveals the exact date of the end of the world, and that he was almost revealed? A secret manuscript, locked deep within the Vatican secret library, surrounded by centuries of mysteries, forbidden secrets, and hidden prophecies. Why did this document never come to light? What is there in him that could shake the foundations of Christianity and provoke absolute fear in humanity? For centuries, the Catholic Church accumulated banned books, censored sacred texts, and hidden knowledge of humanity. Manuscripts that never reached the public eye because they could simply change everything you believe about the history of the world, about faith, and even about oneself, end of times. And among these documents forgotten by time, there is one that talks about the apocalypse revealed, with a set date, the day the world will end. But why hide this truth? Why the Vatican have you been silent for so long? What? Are they afraid you'll find out? They exist religious conspiracies so profound that even the most faithful cannot imagine. What does the Vatican hide? What is locked inside the walls of the secret library, protected by centuries of silence and power? Forbidden sacred texts, hidden stories of Christianity, books banned by the Church that tell a completely different version from the one you know. The fear of revelation is so big that, over the centuries, researchers and scholars disappeared mysteriously when trying to access these records. What was in those pages? What makes this Vatican secret document so dangerous? And the scariest, is this prophecy closer to being fulfilled than we imagine? Today you will understand why the Vatican guard this secret so zealously, and most importantly, you will find out what is really written in this document. Then, don't leave there, because what comes next, it will change your view of the end of the world forever. And in the face of all this, in the face of this dark secret, kept under lock and key by the Vatican, one thing becomes clear: we need to be prepared. No matter what your faith or belief is, what is written in these banned books, in these hidden prophecies, shows us that the unknown may be closer than we imagine. And that's exactly why, before we move on to the most impactful revelations, I want to make you a very important invitation. If you believe in the power of prayer, if you feel that the world needs spiritual strength faced with so many hidden secrets, leave your prayer request here in the comments now. Write your name, your city, or what's in your heart. Let's form a prayer chain in the comments, because together we can cry out for protection, for wisdom, and for the truth that has been hidden for so long. Let's pray for those who seek answers, for those who want to see beyond what has always been told. And if this topic is already moving you, if you feel that these hidden truths need to be revealed to the world, leave a like now, because this helps this video to reach more people who also need to know what's behind the Vatican secrets. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, because what comes next will surprise you even more. You can't miss it. What I'm going to show you now will make everything you've heard so far seem small compared to what's really behind this secret document. Let's discover the truth together. And to further situate you in this dark and disturbing story, we need to go back to a specific day, a day that almost changed everything, but ended up being silenced by the strength and power of those who control humanity's darkest secrets. The Vatican, with all its ancient structure, has been the scene of secret meetings that never became known to the public, meetings that decided what could or could not be told to the world, what should remain hidden in the darkness of secret library. There are records that, on one of these occasions, a small group of cardinals, bishops, and scholars were hastily summoned within the walls of the Vatican. The tension was almost palpable. There, between the walls that guard the banned books from the Church, something was about to be revealed that not even the most faithful of religious people could imagine. A document, supposedly found during an excavation in a restricted area of the Vatican City itself, had fallen into the hands of a few, an ancient manuscript, hidden for centuries, which brought something that no one was prepared to see, an apocalyptic prophecy, with scheduled date, a record so powerful, so dangerous, that it could destroy the faith of millions of people around the world. They say that this meeting was arranged hastily, held at night, away from prying eyes. The lights from the domes, St. Peter, they shone over Rome. But inside, the atmosphere was one of pure terror and fear. The content of that lost manuscript, it was simple, direct, and scary. In it, not only was there a clear description of the signs of the end times, but also the exact date of the apocalypse. A day that, according to the text, would mark the beginning of the collapse of the world as we know it. Something so disturbing that, according to leaked reports years later, some of those who had access to the document were never the same. But what scares the most about this story, and what makes it even more real, are the rumors that this manuscript is not the only one. There are other records hidden in the corridors of the Vatican secret library, which talk about the same event. Forgotten prophecies, forbidden sacred texts, documents that have never been made public because the Vatican knows the weight and consequence of releasing this type of truth to humanity. The question that remains is, what else are they hiding? Over the centuries, researchers, scholars, and even priests tried to gain access to these documents. Many of them disappeared without a trace. Others were discredited, silenced, or simply disappeared from history as if they had never existed. Why all this? What is there in these manuscripts that justifies so much fear? Have you ever stopped to think about it? If there was nothing, why would the Vatican, would you take the trouble to hide, silence, and do everything to keep these texts under lock and key? And the most disturbing thing of all is that this story, it's not a conspiracy theory. There are reports, official documents, and even records of secret meetings that took place within the Vatican City, in which the impacts of revealing this truth to the world were discussed. The fear was clear. Chaos would be inevitable. Churches would leak. Faith would be shaken. Society would collapse. And the scariest thing, everything could start exactly on the date written in that manuscript. Some rumors suggest that this meeting was recorded, that there are hidden recordings of cardinals trembling at the reading of that apocalyptic text. One of them even got up from the table and said, "If this is true, we are all doomed." Can you imagine the weight of that sentence? A man of faith who lived his entire life within the church, despairing when he read what was written. This is the size of the revelation that the Vatican tried to keep it buried. And the question that remains unanswered, what was actually written there? What is this end of the world date that the Vatican knows, but has never had the courage to reveal to the public? Are we closer to this than we think? Will the recent events, what we have seen, are the first signs of this forgotten prophecy? And more, is there still time to stop it? This doubt is gnawing at the minds of all those who have heard about this lost manuscript. And what makes everything even more intriguing is that no one knows for sure the whereabouts of this document. Some say he was burned that very night. Others swear he was locked away again in the depths of the earth. Secret library, where only the Pope and few cardinals have access. There are still those who believe that a copy was made, and that it ended up falling into the hands of influential people who, to this day, keep this secret under lock and key. But what no one can deny is that the fear of that meeting still echoes within the walls of the Vatican. A fear that grew, spread, and that, little by little, reaches us, as if destiny itself were warning us. There's something big coming, and the Vatican knows it. So I really want to know what you think about all of this. Tell me in the comments, do you believe that the Vatican really knows the date of the end of the world? Right below, comment, "I want the truth," if you feel like it's time for these secrets to come out. I want to see this phrase spread in the comments because together we will show that we no longer accept living in the shadows of these forbidden secrets. Now, what really intrigues and terrifies those who have heard about this prohibited manuscript, it's your content. What exactly was written there? What secrets were so dangerous that they led the Vatican to act quickly to silence any leaks? What is known, from the few reports that escaped the control of Catholic Church, is that the text described, in an extremely detailed way, a series of prophecies about the end of times. But they were not just vague or symbolic predictions like those we find in traditional scriptures. No, what was recorded in that document was something much more direct, more precise, almost impossible to ignore. The lost manuscript described clear and visible signs that would begin to happen all over the world, indicating that the end was near. They were descriptions of events that, interestingly, we have already seen begin to manifest themselves over the last few decades. Wars, pandemics, the spread of hunger, inequality growing to levels never seen before, the increase in violence and intolerance, nature showing signs of collapse, with earthquakes becoming stronger, dormant volcanoes waking up, the climate becoming unpredictable, and most disturbing, the emergence of charismatic leaders, which would gradually dominate the masses, leading humanity towards a path of no return. And among all these revelations, the most frightening point of that text was the data final, a date written in red letters, as if the blood itself had been used to record it. A date that would mark the beginning of the true apocalypse, the moment when the world as we know it would simply cease to exist. According to the manuscript, this date was directly linked to a specific alignment of the stars, to a cosmic phenomenon that, according to scholars who had contact with excerpts from the document, is no longer a theory. It is something that science already recognizes as possible. This information alone would be enough to shake the world's faith. Imagine billions of people, of all religions, suddenly discovering that the church itself, the one that always preached salvation, hid for centuries a document that confirms the end of humanity, and worse, I knew exactly when it would happen. What would be the impact of this? How much would this tear down everything that was built on faith, hope, and the belief that there is a greater purpose guiding our steps? Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue? Churches around the world would be invaded, burned, desecrated. People would completely lose faith, not just in the church, but in any belief system. Because deep down, what everyone would think would be, if the church knew and hid it, what else could be being hidden from us? And when faith is lost, what is left? And that is why this document was never released. That's why it was hidden, locked, perhaps even destroyed. Because the Vatican knows. You know that the day this truth comes to light, nothing will be the same again. Not even the church would survive this impact. And honestly, neither does humanity itself. Because the human being, without faith, without a belief that there is something greater, simply becomes empty, dangerous, capable of anything. But the most frightening thing about all of this is that, even without this official revelation, many scholars and theologians over the centuries were already suspicious of the existence of this type of prophecy. Many even wrote about it in books that were quickly banned and hunted down by the Holy Inquisition. There are records of monks who disappeared after trying to translate ancient manuscripts, of priests who were excommunicated for insisting that the church hid the true date of the Last Judgment, and history, as always, repeating itself. Anyone who tries to bring to light what was done to remain in the shadows ends up silenced. And now, when we look around us and see everything that is happening in the world, it is impossible not to wonder, could these signs of the end times, are they already among us? Could it be that, without knowing it, we are already living the first chapters of this prophecy? Could it be that the chaos, wars, diseases, crises, and fear that spread every day through the news are not exactly what was described in this article? Secret manuscript? I confess to you, thinking about it makes me shiver, because everything seems to fit together. It all makes too much sense to be just a coincidence. And what worries me most is knowing that, while most people live day to day thinking that everything is just another bad phase in the history of humanity, there are a few who know the truth, who know that the Vatican has hidden from us the greatest of all secrets, and that perhaps this secret is closer to being revealed than ever. And now, if we stop for a moment to reflect on all this, it becomes impossible not to imagine what could really happen if this banned Vatican document would come to light. If somehow this lost manuscript were exposed to the entire world, if every word written in it was read aloud, if this end of the world date, if it were finally revealed, how do you think people would react? Because what is at stake here is not just each person's individual faith, but the very balance of society as we know it. The first reaction, without a doubt, would be the global panic. Imagine for a moment the headlines of the biggest newspapers in the world stating in bold letters, "Vatican secret archives leak, reveals exact date of apocalypse." Social networks exploding, the whole world stopping to try to understand if that was really true. People leaving work, schools closing, markets being emptied by desperate crowds wanting to stock up on food, water, anything that could guarantee survival in the last days of humanity. The rush for churches, temples, and any place considered sacred would be insane. Millions kneeling in the streets, crying out for forgiveness, for mercy, for a chance at salvation. Fear would spread faster than any virus or war, a fear that, because of so much profound, would destroy any hope of normality. But it doesn't stop there. The leak of this manuscript would also provoke the collapse of world faith, because when confirming that the Vatican always knew the date of the end of times, and worse, if he hid this from all humanity, the feeling of betrayal would spread like wildfire. Catholics, Christians, religious people from all corners of the world would turn against church, and not just against the Vatican, but against all religious institutions. The question would echo in every person's mind. If they hid this, what else did they hide from us? The blind faith of millions would be broken overnight. And when faith breaks, when the spiritual pillar of a society collapses, chaos ensues. Now imagine the effect of this in extremely religious countries, where faith guides the laws and behavior of the people. Extremist groups would see this as the perfect opportunity to act. Religious wars would appear in droves. On the one hand, those who would feel betrayed, seeking revenge against everything that represents organized faith. On the other, the fanatics who would say that all this was the work of the evil one, and that therefore, they need to start a holy war to purify the world before the end comes. What would follow would be one of the greatest conflicts humanity has ever seen. Civil wars, massacres, religious persecution, a true modern witch hunt, and all this because of a manuscript that to this day, no one really knows where it is, but that the Vatican, they know. They know the power this document has in the wrong hands. They know what could happen if humanity learns the truth. And that is why, for centuries, Catholic Church, he does everything he can to keep this secret buried, because not even they have control over what comes next. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just look at history. Just remember how humanity has always reacted to the fear of the unknown. How many times has panic taken over people for much less? A rumor, a prediction without proof, a rumor. All of this was enough to cause destruction, deaths, and chaos. Now, imagine something concrete, something real, coming directly from the Vatican secret archives, something that carries the weight of the most powerful and oldest institution in the Western world. It wouldn't just be a temporary panic. It would be the end of world order. And don't think that governments would be able to contain it. It doesn't matter the army. It doesn't matter the police or any security force. When fear spreads, when faith crumbles, there is no one who can stop the crowd. Laws would lose their value. Money would no longer be important. The most primitive instinct would take over people, survive at any cost. And all this without even considering the impact that this revelation would have behind the scenes of world politics. Because where there is power, there are interests, and many of these interests are directly linked to people's faith. Religious leaders have influenced political decisions for centuries, and if this pillar collapses, what will be left? The power vacuum would create the perfect environment for the emergence of new, more extremist, more violent leaders. People who would take advantage of other people's despair to impose their own rules, their own truths. It's scary to think that a simple manuscript has the power to trigger all of this, isn't it? But the truth is that this power is there, dormant, hidden, just waiting for the right moment, or the wrong moment, to be revealed. And maybe, just maybe, that moment is closer than we imagine. And now, after everything you've heard, I really want to know what you think about this possibility. Because honestly, there is no way to remain indifferent to a story like this. So write it in the comments. If this manuscript is real, the world won't be able to handle it. I want to see this phrase spread here, because only then will I know who really understood the weight of this secret. But the most disturbing thing about all of this, and what really makes your spine run cold, is thinking about the people who supposedly had access to this banned Vatican manuscript. Names that have emerged throughout history, priests, bishops, historians, and even independent researchers, all of them attracted by the same desire to discover the truth behind the hidden secrets of the Church. Some of these names even left records, small clues scattered in letters, diaries, or public statements that were quickly hushed up. But what's striking, and I want you to pay attention to this, is that many of them have simply disappeared. Yes, they disappeared. They disappeared from the face of the earth as if they had never existed. People who have dedicated their entire lives to research into the Vatican's secret archives, renowned scholars who had everything to lose, but still decided to take risks to try to uncover what the Church was hiding about the end of times. And what do all these cases have in common? Absolute silence, the sudden disappearance, or worse, death under mysterious circumstances, always shrouded in official versions that no one has ever been able to prove. One of the best known and at the same time most forgotten cases, on purpose, is that of the Italian priest Francesco Bianchi. He was a scholar of apocryphal Gospels, and according to reports at the time, he had access to part of this manuscript during a renovation at the Vatican Secret Library in the 19th century. They say he was locked in a room for days, reading and rereading pages written in ancient Latin, completely distraught by what he was discovering. People who saw him at that time said that his eyes looked empty, as if he had lost faith right then and there, in front of those words. Shortly afterwards, Father Bianchi was found dead in his own room, within the Vatican apartments. Officially, they said it was a heart attack, but the rumors that circulated among the halls whispered something else, that he had been silenced because he threatened to tell the world what he saw. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to him. No letters, no records, nothing. And tell me, why would someone so involved, so dedicated, disappear like that? Why didn't anyone ever talk about this again? Another name that always appears when the subject is this secret document is that of the German historian Klaus Reinhardt, a respected researcher, with several books published about the behind-the-scenes of the Catholic See.
Church and the books banned by the Church. Reinhardt, who was never one to raise absurd theories, always remained in the field of serious academic research. But everything changed when, during one of his authorized visits to the Vatican, he came across something that, according to him, shouldn't exist. No one knows for sure what he saw. What is known is that, shortly afterwards, he completely abandoned his career, disappeared from the spotlight, and went to live alone in an isolated cabin in
the Alps. When asked by colleagues why he disappeared so suddenly, he simply replied, "If I talk, I die, and so will you." This phrase, to this day, echoes among the few who still remember this story. And once again, the question remains that no one has the courage to answer. What did he see? What made a man of science, a world-renowned academic, give up everything out of fear? And why didn't anyone else talk about it? The answer, my friend, is simple. Because what is in this prohibited manuscript? It goes beyond anything we can imagine. And it wasn't just priests and historians. There are also records that some members of the Swiss Guard itself, those trained soldiers who provide the Pope's personal security, even commented among themselves on a document that should never be read. One of the guards, who requested anonymity when he made this statement years later, said that he saw, with his own eyes, a document being taken into a restricted room in the Vatican. According to him, the document was sealed with wax and bore a symbol that he never forgot. An inverted cross surrounded by a circle of flames, a symbol that, according to him, has never been seen anywhere else, not even in the most secret rituals of the Church. And do you know what happened to that guard? A few months later, he was dismissed due to psychological problems. He was never seen in public again, and his family never spoke about him again. Once again, the same pattern repeats itself. Someone who comes too close to the truth. Someone who sees what they shouldn't see, and absolute silence takes over. I know this all sounds like a movie script. It even seems too good to be true. But what if it is? What if all these reports that have emerged over the centuries are not just urban legends, but parts of a real story hidden from all of us? A story that Vatican does everything to bury it, but every now and then it slips through the cracks of a system that, despite being powerful, cannot control everything. And now I ask you, what would you do if you were one of these people? Would you have the courage to speak, to expose the truth, even knowing that your life could end there, at that moment? Or would you also remain silent, as they all did? Because if there's one thing this story shows us, it's that the fear of revealing what's hidden is greater than any promise of glory or recognition. And that's why no one ever talked about it again. Because the price of truth, in this case, is too high. Because the Vatican, you know the weight of this secret, and because whoever tried to get too close paid with their own lives, or with complete oblivion. And what most draws attention in all of this, what most feeds this feeling that there is something much bigger and much darker behind this story, is the absolute silence of the Vatican. To date, no authority from the Catholic Church, no pope, no cardinal, not even those spokesmen who are so quick to deny or explain controversies, have ever officially commented on the existence of this lost manuscript. No words, no notes, nothing. It's as if the document simply didn't exist. Or, who knows, it existed so much that talking about it would be the same as admitting a secret capable of destroying centuries of power, faith, and control over humanity. And it is precisely this silence that raises the greatest suspicions. Because, let's be honest, the Vatican has always had a very clear stance when it comes to combating conspiracy theories or serious charges. Whenever someone raises their voice to say that the Church is hiding something, that it manipulates information, or that it acts in the shadows, they make a point of going public, of denying everything, of trying to put an end to it. But with this document, nothing. No line, no denial, no attempt to close the matter. And then I ask you, if this manuscript does not exist, why so much silence? Why this almost desperate omission? If it were just another silly theory, another invention of creative minds, the Vatican would have already laughed at it, would have said that it was all a lie, that there never was any apocalyptic manuscript with a date set for the end of the world. But no, they prefer silence. And let's face it, when an institution like the Vatican chooses to remain silent in the face of such a serious accusation, it is because there is something very, very big hidden. Because silence in this case is not just an absence of words. It is a veiled confirmation that there is something there that cannot be revealed. And don't think that the Vatican doesn't know about these rumors. They know. They know very well. Do you know that from time to time the story of this secret document, it resurfaces? Whether in a book, in a daring report, or as now on the internet, where information spreads like wildfire. And yet, they choose silence. They prefer that people doubt, that the story seems like a legend, that it falls into oblivion. Because if they tried to deny it, if they gave any answer, they would be recognizing, even if indirectly, that the subject exists. And they cannot allow that. But the problem is that this silence ends up having the opposite effect. Instead of burying the story, he strengthens it. It makes more and more people start to ask themselves, if it's not real, why so much secrecy? If there's nothing to hide, why don't they just deny it and put an end to it once and for all? And it is this doubt, this gap in the official discourse, that keeps this story alive, pulsating, gaining strength over the years. And between us, you know as well as I do, when it comes to Vatican, everything that involves secrecy, silence, and mystery ends up taking on gigantic proportions. We are not talking about any institution. We are talking about the largest and oldest religious organization in the world, owner of a historical collection that literally keeps the history of humanity. An institution that has survived empires, wars, revolutions, always reinventing itself, always finding a way to maintain control. And for this very reason, he does not act by chance. Everything is calculated. Everything has a purpose. And if the purpose now is absolute silence, it's because they know the size of the bomb they hold in their hands. They know that if this manuscript is revealed, if the world knows that there is a date set for the end of time, and that this date has been hidden from humanity, there will be no going back. The faith, a hope, a social structure, everything falls apart. And along with all this, the power of the Church itself also crumbles. Because no one would believe in an institution that hid, for centuries, the greatest of all truths. And there's more. The very fact that this manuscript is related to Vatican's secret library already says a lot. You know, and I know too that this library is one of the most mysterious and inaccessible places in the world. Very few people go there. And whoever enters leaves with the obligation to keep everything they saw an absolute secret. There is control so strict but so absurd that to this day no one knows exactly what is stored there. And if there is something capable of destroying the world's faith, it is certainly within. Now tell me, Why would a library that officially only serves to store historical documents need so much security? Why keep something secret that, theoretically, should only be of interest to scholars and historians? And the answer, once again, is clear, because what's inside goes far beyond history. It goes beyond religion. It is something that affects the destiny of humanity. And this apocalyptic manuscript, this prophecy about the end of the world, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And that is exactly what the Vatican fears. It's not just revealing the end date. It's the domino effect that this would cause. It's the question of what else is hidden there, between those dark corridors, between those walls full of secrets and conspiracies. Because once the veil is lifted, there is no going back. And then, my friend, everything the Church built in 2,000 years collapses in seconds. And now, after all this you've heard, I want to hear from you. Do you really believe that the Vatican would remain silent if this was all just fabrication? Or is their silence the biggest indication that we are much closer to the truth than we imagine? I want to see you participating in this conversation here in the comments, then right below. The Vatican's silence only proves that it is real. I want to see this phrase spread around here, so we can show that no one believes in this game of silence and omission anymore. Now stop and think with me. What if has the Vatican always known when the world will end? And if this date is not a fabrication, it is not a conspiracy theory, as they have tried to make it out to be over the centuries, but rather a real, accurate and documented information hidden in the depths of Vatican's secret library? What if they, from the beginning, keep this secret hidden because they know that simply revealing it could trigger the greatest social, religious and spiritual collapse humanity has ever seen? It's hard to imagine, I know, but think about the consequences of that. What if everything you believe, everything you were taught as a child about faith, salvation, final judgment and the end of times was already written, stuck on an old piece of paper with a set date, a hidden countdown that no one is aware of? What if the Vatican knows exactly the day and hour when everything will end, and yet continues to feed people's faith, keeping churches open, holding masses and promises, while behind the scenes, they secretly prepare for the inevitable? Sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? But what if it isn't? What if their silence is precisely because knowing the truth changes everything? Imagine what would happen if, suddenly, they went up to the altar of St. Peter's and told the world, yes, there is a manuscript and it reveals the end, and the date is near. How would people react? How would you react? Because what is at stake here is much more than religion. It is the future of humanity. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the terror of knowing that no matter what you do, the ending is already written. Now imagine that behind every secret meeting, every conclave, every papal election, there is this weight, this awareness that the Church is living the last chapters of its history, and that their true role is no longer to guide the faithful, but to hold the secret until the last second. What if every pope, upon assuming the throne of Peter, received this manuscript, this terrible revelation that changes everything, an oath of silence that crosses generations, always renewed, always maintained? Because telling would be signing the death sentence of the Church, faith, and the foul world. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever wondered what goes on in the head of a man who carries this responsibility? A man who knows the end is near, but who can't say anything, because if he does, chaos will start before its time? And if this is the real reason the Vatican keeps its secrets so closely guarded, why do its secret files are inaccessible? Why does anyone who gets too close to the truth simply disappear? Because, deep down, their only mission now is keep the world turning until the last second. And the more I think about it, the more it all starts to make sense. Why, after all, is the Church so concerned with controlling information? Why so much effort to hide banned books, hidden sacred texts, buried prophecies? Wouldn't it be easier to admit that some things were lost in time, that certain knowledge was left aside? But no, what we see is a continuous, even desperate effort to protect every piece of history that can, in some way, point to this data. Final, as if every word, every sentence, every ancient scroll, could bring to the surface what they fear most, the recognition that time is running out. And then I ask you, do you really believe that all of this is a coincidence? Do you really think the Vatican maintains the secret library, with more than 80 kilometers of underground archives, just on a whim? Do you really think that the power of the Church, consolidated over 2 millennia, is maintained only by people's faith? Or is there something much bigger behind it all? Something that gives the Church a power that no one else has. The power of information about the end. Because think about it with me. If the Vatican knows when the world is going to end, they have the greatest weapon ever created in their hands. Not a bomb, not an army, but the absolute knowledge that, regardless of who governs, which empire rises or falls, the end is already marked. And knowing this gives power. A silent, dark, but unbreakable power. And if you think this is just an assumption, I challenge you to look at history with different eyes. How many times have you seen the Vatican being pressured, accused, questioned, and yet remaining firm, unshakable? How many times has the Church been surrounded by scandals, by crises, and yet it has survived? What makes an institution survive for so many centuries while empires fall, civilizations disappear, kings and presidents pass away? The answer may lie precisely in this secret. They know. They always knew. And the most perverse thing is to think that while we continue living our lives, worrying about tomorrow, about the bills, about the future of our children, inside between those ancient and imposing walls, there is a small group of men who already know that the future doesn't matter, because the future is already written, and all that's left for them to do is wait and make sure no one finds out. Now tell me, how would you feel if you had access to this secret? How would you react if you knew that everything you were taught about hope, about building a better tomorrow, about free will, it was all a lie? How would you feel knowing that every choice you make, every decision, every dream, all of it is useless because the ending is already defined? And whoever has known this for centuries, instead of sharing it with the world, decided to hide it? It's a cruel thought, I know, but it is precisely this type of doubt that the Vatican does everything it can to keep away from us. Because they know that the day this story breaks, the day someone breaks the pact of silence, nothing will keep the world standing. And then, my friend, the real apocalypse won't be a meteor or a war. It will be the collapse of our own faith in humanity. And the most disturbing thing about all of this, what really doesn't get out of my head, are the recent rumors that have started to circulate. Stories that, if before they seemed like something from old books, are now gaining strength in the shadows of modernity. Because even today, in the 21st century, there are still researchers, historians, and even members of high society trying, at all costs, to access the archives of Vatican's secret library. They know, or at least suspect, that what is hidden there could change the course of human history. Unofficial reports indicate that, in recent years, there has been a significant increase in requests for access to the library's oldest and most restricted documents. People linked to renowned universities, experts in biblical archaeology, and even scholars financed by private groups, and all with the same objective: to find concrete evidence about the prohibited manuscript, the so-called apocalyptic document that would provide not just a date, but a detailed description of how the world will end. The most curious thing is that, according to internal sources, none of these requests were accepted. None. And once again, the Vatican closes in absolute silence. Don't you think it's strange? If there is nothing there, if this is all just the fertile imagination of conspirators, why so much protection? Why so afraid of letting the world see what's in store? What does the Vatican fear we will discover? Because what you hear in the backroom corridors is that some of these researchers got very close to the truth. Influential people, with access to places few have ever set foot in, suddenly abandoning their research, disappearing from public life, as if they had seen something they shouldn't have seen. And always the same lame excuse: personal problems, health issues, or simply tiredness from academic life. But you and I know that's not the case. We know that when someone falls silent so abruptly, when they abandon a lifetime of study and dedication, it is because what they saw was too great. It was disturbing enough to make anyone rethink their own existence. And then, inevitably, the question that echoes in the minds of those who follow all this closely is, what if we are closer to the end than we imagine? Think with me. Everything we've been experiencing in recent years seems like a script written in advance. Global pandemics, economic crises, wars that explode without warning, natural disasters happening one after another, the climate completely out of control, world leaders increasingly extremist. It seems that the world has entered a spiral of destruction and no one can control it anymore. What if all this isn't random? And if in fact, these are the first signs, the warnings described in that apocalyptic manuscript that the Vatican hides at all costs. What if this global collapse was predicted centuries ago, and now we are, unknowingly, living the last chapters of this story? It's disturbing to imagine this, but more and more facts point in that direction. And that is precisely why so many researchers take risks, because deep down, everyone feels that the clock is ticking, that the countdown has already begun, and that soon, very soon, the truth will knock on our door, and there will be no way to ignore it anymore. In fact, one of the most recent cases that almost no one had the courage to publicize happened a few years ago. A French archaeologist, an expert in ancient texts and decipherer of dead languages, obtained, through powerful contacts, limited permission to study some library archives. What he found inside no one knows for sure, but what is said behind the scenes is that, after just 2 days of access, he stopped his research, left Rome in the middle of the night, and never spoke publicly about the matter again. It disappeared. He abandoned his career. To this day, no one knows where he is. And once again, the pattern repeats itself. Someone gets too close, sees something they shouldn't, and disappears. And that, to me, just proves that we are really dealing with something much bigger than any of us can imagine. Because if it was just a rumor, if it was just another silly theory, people wouldn't act like that. They wouldn't be afraid. They wouldn't run away. They wouldn't drop everything. But they let go. They run away. They disappear. And silence, always silence, settles in. And then, I ask you again, what if all this is real? What if that manuscript is there, locked, hidden, waiting for the right moment, or the wrong, to fall into the hands of someone who will have the courage to expose everything? What if the Vatican, even with all its power, can no longer contain this bomb? Because let's be honest, no institution in the world is invincible. No wall is impenetrable. And when the truth wants to come out, my friend, it comes out. It may take years, centuries even, but eventually it explodes. What if it is now? What if we really are closer to the end than we think? What if everything that is happening around us is not a coincidence, but rather the fulfillment of a prophecy that only half a dozen people in the world know about? What if, while we live day to day, worrying about small problems, the real threat is already underway, and worst of all, planned, known and hidden by those who should be the first to protect us? It's a desperate thought, I know, but it is exactly this kind of fear that keeps the Vatican in control, because they know that humanity, when faced with its own finitude, completely loses its way. And maybe, just maybe, this is the last trick up the Church's sleeve, keeping the secret until the last second, because they know that the day this story comes to light, everything we know will end. Not by the hands of God, not by a divine force, but by ourselves, due to our inability to deal with the fact that the end is written, and it is much closer than we would like to believe. And now, after all this, I really want to hear from you. I want to know what you think about these rumors, about these researchers who disappear, about the real possibility that we are living the last chapters of this story. So write it in the comments. What if we're closer to the end than we think? I want to see this phrase echoing down here, because only then will I know who is with me until the end on this journey in search of truth. And given everything you've heard so far, it's impossible not to question yourself, not to look around and start seeing the world with different eyes. Because everything fits together. Everything seems to make even more sense when we accept the possibility that the Vatican really knows when the world will end. And we are not talking about any assumption or an unfounded theory. We are talking about a sequence of facts, signs, old and recent reports that, when placed side by side, form a scenario that is too frightening to be just a coincidence. If you stop to think, Everything that has been happening in the last few decades seems like one big rehearsal for the end. The signs are there, wide open before us. Nature reacting in an increasingly violent way. The world plunged into political and economic crises, morals and values being put to the test every day, science racing to find answers, and at the same time, coming up against more questions. Meanwhile, the Vatican remains silent, observing everything from afar, maintaining their traditions, protecting their secret files, as if they already knew that none of that matters anymore, as if they were just waiting for the right time, the exact moment. And the burning question is, why? Why this silence? Why does the most powerful church in the history of humanity insist on ignoring all of this, pretending not to see what is happening? Is it really that they are simply oblivious, or do they know exactly what is coming and therefore prefer silence, secrecy, and absolute control of information? Have you ever stopped to think about what it means to know when the world will end? The weight of this, the power that this gives in the hands of a few? Because if the Vatican really knows the date, as so many believe, then everything else becomes meaningless. Everything we do, all our daily struggles, our plans for the future, our dreams, everything becomes useless in the face of such an absolute and irreversible truth. And maybe that's precisely why they never said anything. Because they know that humanity is not ready to deal with the inevitable. Just imagine what would happen if tomorrow the Pope stood on the altar of St. Peter and said, on the World Wide Web, that there is indeed a secret manuscript hidden in us Vatican secret archives, and that it bears the exact date of the end of times. Imagine the panic, the chaos, the despair that would take over the entire world. People would quit their jobs, their families, their responsibilities. The churches would be invaded, the Vatican surrounded. The streets would be filled with desperate believers, while many others would give vent to the worst human instincts, committing the most brutal acts because, after all, the end is coming, and there is nothing left to lose. And that's exactly what they fear. That's why they prefer silence. Because they know that keeping this secret is the only way to guarantee a few more years of control, of order, of apparent normality. They know that revealing the truth would open the doors to the real apocalypse, not the one described in the scriptures, but the one that is born of fear, despair, and the complete loss of hope. What if this is all real? What if the Vatican, behind all the pomp, celebrations, and faith that moves millions, is just putting on an act, waiting for time to pass, aware that the end is much closer than we imagine? Because let's face it, it doesn't make sense to keep so many secrets, spend billions on security, build an underground library with access limited to half a dozen people, if what was there was just old paper and old books with no relevance. No, there's something big inside, something capable of changing everything. And it is no coincidence that from time to time, stories about this manuscript resurface, gain strength, resonate like an echo of what is hidden. And the strangest thing is that the Vatican never denies it. They prefer to ignore it, as if they knew that the less they said, the better, as if they know that silence is the only protection they have left. And then, my friend, I ask you, do you really believe this is all coincidence? Do you really believe that this ancient institution, which has survived wars, scandals, and persecutions, is simply storing old paper down there? Or could it be that what they guard is in fact the greatest weapon of all, knowledge about our end? Because if that's true, everything we're experiencing right now, this constant feeling that the world is about to explode, that something big is about to happen, is just the beginning. It's just a foreshadowing of what's to come. And the craziest thing is to think that, while we live our lives, worrying about little things, inside the Vatican, between those thick and cold walls, does anyone know the exact date when this will all end? And now that you've come this far, you've probably realized that everything we've talked about so far is just the tip of the iceberg. What the Vatican hides in the depths of its secret library goes far beyond a single manuscript revealing the date of the end of the world. There are reports, whispers, old and new, that among these hidden documents, there is something even more disturbing, more dangerous, more capable of shaking the pillars of faith as we know it. An archive so secret, so closely guarded, that not even many within the church itself dare to pronounce the name. What if I told you now that this other document talks directly about the greatest secret in the history of Christianity? What if I revealed to you that there are hidden manuscripts that deal with the true identity of the Messiah, and that everything we have been told to date may be nothing more than a carefully shaped version, manipulated over the centuries, a plan so well thought out that it kept the entire world believing in a narrative, while the truth remained buried, far from the eyes of all of us? Just thinking about it makes the mind start to spin, because if it is real, and the evidence is increasingly strong, everything you know about the origin of the Christian faith, about the Gospels, about the Apostles, and even about the mission of the Christian himself, Jesus Christ, can be completely different. And what is most frightening is that this type of document is not hidden in some lost desert or in caves forgotten by time. It's there, locked, guarded under the watchful eye of the most powerful men on earth, inside the Vatican walls. Now imagine what would happen if this second manuscript came to light. We would not just be talking about the end of faith, but about a shock so great that it could destroy the foundations of everything we know about the history of humanity. And unlike the other document, which talks about the apocalypse and the end of times, this one has an even more cruel weight. He questions the very origin of our faith. Because if it is true, everything we have been taught since we were children about who the true Messiah was may be nothing more than an illusion, a game of power and manipulation created centuries ago. And have you ever stopped to think why no one talks about this? Why have we never heard a word from popes, bishops, or cardinals about the possibility of another, more dangerous, more revealing document? The answer is simple: because this secret is too big. Big enough to make the world fall apart. Big enough to put an end to the greatest religious institution in history. Big enough to make even the most faithful question everything they've believed in their entire lives. And I know that you, like me, want to know more about this. He wants to understand what is really hidden behind these sacred walls, what the Vatican would never dare reveal. And I promise you, in the next video, I will tell you. I will show you what no one has the courage to expose, what has always been hidden from humanity. The secret about the true Messiah, a secret so old, so forbidden, that it could change everything you know about history. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because you're really in search of the truth and want to know what the Vatican has been hiding for centuries. And I only have one thing to tell you. You are part of a select group that reached the end of this video, and that already shows that you are ready to go deeper into this journey. Then do the following. Subscribe to the channel now, because there are many more revelations coming, and you won't want to miss anything. Turn on the notification bell to receive the next videos firsthand, because the sequel to this story will surprise you even more. And so I know that you are one of mine, that you stayed here until the end. Comment now below. I want to know everything. Write exactly that sentence in the comments. I want to see who has really stuck with me this far and is ready to continue. Oh, and of course, leave a like on this video because it really helps to spread this message and bring more people into this investigation with us. And it doesn't go away. The next video, it's already appearing on your screen. Click now and come with me to discover what the Vatican most fears the world will discover. I'll wait for you there.